Okay, we're doing chapter 11. We're configuring DHCP. So on the first server, I'm going to set my IP address.
Right.
Guys, this I'm recording.
You said something about validation earlier?
The post configuration stage. After you install the DHCP, there's that little link that shows up where you have to configure it, which is creating two groups, a DHCP admin group, a DHCP user group, and it also authorizes the server. Make sure that you click commit there. So guys, I'm going to make sure I sign into my DHCP server as a network admin, not my local admin. Then I'm going to install DHCP on both machines. Here's what I'm referring to. Either right here, complete DHCP configuration, or under your notification window if you closed it. I need you to click on that link create your two groups, your DHCP admin group and your DHCP user group, and authorize your server. So you click next, and one word, commit. Again, I'm already signed in as my domain admin. So this was in the link right here. This is what you guys forget all the time. And then your DHCPs never work. Freddie, do NS lookup space jones.com. Tell me what the results come back. On that machine they can't join.
Back to him too.
But it won't join?
Yeah, it won't join. And it says I have multiple IP addresses for some reason.
Do an IP config all and let me know what it is. You're probably spoofing one of your own. Do an IP config all and tell me if you have a 169 address.
Yeah, I do.
Okay, so good. Move up to 192.168.0.15.
0.15. Weird. Maybe that's the no, I use 10. Yeah, 15 worked though, like 12 and 13, that never worked. I don't know what it's.
I'm going to pause this for a minute. We'll resume. If I highlight DHCP, not the server, and go to Manage Authorized Servers, remember we have those two old ones, and then here's our two new ones. Guys, with this lab, we can't complete all of these labs if I only have one DHCP server. By having multiple DHCP servers authorized, when you right-click something, more things light up. More things that aren't grayed out. So we actually are given more options because we have two authorized servers. Again, I'm not touching those 4 and 5 for this lab. So I'm going to create on one machine a new scope. And I'm just going to do something like this. No. Printers. I want to create one scope that passes out IP addresses to my printers. And I'm going to give the whole range, and then we're going to exclude what we don't want.
So it's 1 to 294.
1 to 254,
Yeah.
and then we're going to exclude
1 to
1 to,
like 15.
no, we're going to exclude, because this is just for printers, to 249.
Can you say what you typed?
192.168.0.1, 2, this is my exclusion range, 192.168.0.249. So we're going to reserve 250 to 254 for printers. Not a lot, but let's just assume we don't have a lot of printers.
Wait, 1 to 249, that's a lot of printers.
No, we're excluding those.
Oh, okay.
We're excluding those IPs, so we're only giving 4 IP addresses per printers.
Could that be used by printers? It's 1 to 249.
Right.
And after that can't be.
Are you serious?
And we're going to let the printers have an 8-hour lease. We don't expect people to walk around with wireless printers.
Well, that's
Okay, and we
kind of cool.
we'll configure the additional options now. 192.168.0.1. Leave my DNS information alone. No Win server. And activate the scope now. Guys, remember we have to hit refresh because it screws up.
Do we delete parent domain and IP?
I'm sorry?
Do we delete the width?
No, I just left it in there just to keep it short.
Should we in the real world?
I would do those as server options and not scope options. Okay, so guys, I'm going to create a vendor class. I'm going to highlight this.
We're still in DHCP 1, right?
I'm still all in DHCP1. I'm going to right-click IPv4 and create a vendor class.
Where's that? Oh.
Find vendor class?
Yep.
Okay.
Define vendor class. So basically, what this is going to do is try to examine that packet coming in and see where it's coming from. You know, have we used vendor classes before?
No.
No.
Pixie Client.
Yes.
Do you remember Pixie Client got additional options like the boot server and the boot file to boot from? We didn't remember that was a vendor class option.
Huh.
So we're going to click Add, and we're going to call this HP Printer.
Sorry, how do you spell that? HP. Oh, HP.
Okay. Then we're examining the ASCII value. As that packet comes in, the DHCP server is going to examine the ASCII value of what the device is. The only way I know how to say how to get this is you don't even have to type it in ASCII. You can actually type it in binary. Turn on Wireshark. Capture packet or DHCP request packet from that printer or whatever vendor class that you want. And look at the code. Wireshark will give it to you in binary and give it to you in ASCII. Take that, paste it in here.
Can you say what you typed in it?
Yes, under display name, HP printer. Under, click on the ASCII, it's a column. I put in Hewlett, capital H-E-W. Oh, guys, listen. It would be different if you put a lowercase w. So you've got to be very specific with the ASCII value. It has to be identical to what you capture from the line. So it's capital H, E-W-L-E-T-T.
All caps?
No, just the capital H. Hyphen. Packard, capital P-A-C-K-A-R-D. Space. Capital J-E-T. No space, capital D-I-R-E-C-T.
Only the first letter of H, P, and J are capital?
And D.
Or D, direct?
Right.
And it was HP printer, right?
HP printer, that was just the name. Hey guys, and you can, again, the only way to find that is grab it. If you have a whole series of laptops that are just for the salespeople, and they're all made from the same vendor, you can probably capture that as well. Or if you had all the same desktops or whatever. I could base it on domain name. I could do a policy on if you had a subdomain or something, everyone from that domain gets this from this IP range. Are we good? Okay, so guys, I'm going to go to this policy right here. Guys, we already created the scope. It's already activated, the whole 9 yards. You want to create a new policy. Guys, just like scope options, I can create a policy for the whole server or just for the scope. I'm going to create one just for the scope. I can have one DHCP server that's used only by whatever that policy is, if I wanted to.
Policies for printers?
Yep. Policy called printers. Sorry. And then you add a condition. You can add conditions, and as soon as you add the next condition, you need to, before you add the next condition, you need to choose whether it's an and or an or. We're only going to have one condition, which is the vendor class is equal to HP printer add. And again, if you don't have that ASCII value right,
No, you need it. Remember the scope was that one, right? That one all the way through.
dot 254, then excluded 1 through 24.
Okay.
Because guys, you remember you can't change the range, but you can change the exclusion. And I would have two scopes. One that excluded the last 4 and then left the first one open for normal activity. Click OK. Next. And basically we don't have to do this. Do you want to configure an IP range for this policy? We can say no, because we already have it set up for that scope. You know, that one scope is just for those printers. Any additional standard DHCP options? There's my, and there that scope is just for printers.
Did you do any of the availability other?
Configure settings for policy?
No. And that's done. So if this DHCP server heard any request for a printer with that vendor class information, again, you gotta. Sometimes you can look it up online. Like HP probably has that up online already. But you know, you want to get the vendor class for these machines, just capture DHCP packet. Just do a release and renew while you're capturing, and you'll get it.
If you have multiple machines from the same brand, but they're slightly different, would it be a bad idea to use like HP wildcard or something like that?
No, that wouldn't be a bad idea, but if that wild card might include some others, you gotta make sure that that wild card is only going to include the ones you want. Okay. Okay. Let's talk about dynamic updates for DNS records. Guys, I'm going to highlight my server. No, I'm not. I'm going to highlight. I'm going to highlight IPv4. Right now, let's say I had a machine that didn't understand DDNS. What is DDNS?
Denial of DNS?
No. What's the
DNS
DDNS?
will actually be.
It's dynamic DNS. You know how when we set up our DNS zone, that it automatically allows us to create pointer records and host records for the machines that are in part of our domain? So we don't have to manually do that. What happens when a machine doesn't understand DDNS? Let's say I have some old server that just, you know, it just doesn't understand DDNS. So who creates the records for that client that doesn't understand DDNS. Or we could have our DHCP server do it on our behalf. So basically what happens is you could say, when you pass out an IP address to a client, connect to DNS and create a pointer record and host record for that client. Who owns that pointer record in that host record? If you right-clicked and went to advanced features and you right-clicked on that record and you saw a security permission, who owns it? Right. You might have to put all your DHCP servers in a group and allow that group to own it. Because if you have multiple DHCP servers and one DHCP server owns that record, another DHCP server might not be able to update it. So there's some tricks you might have to do with DHCP if you have multiple DHCP servers, because once one DHCP owns it, the other servers might not be able to update it. So right, if we go to this DNS, it says enable dynamic DNS updates according to the settings below. Dynamically update DNS records only if requested by the DHCP client.
How did you get there?
I highlighted IPv4, I right-clicked it, went to properties, and clicked on the DNS tab. What happens, the client might know this is kind of a default setting, but a client who understands DDNS won't need this particular setting, because they're not going to ask the server to update the records for them unless they understand DDNS. So this really doesn't do a lot for the default setting. Doesn't really do a lot for a client that doesn't understand DDNS. If you say this, it'll always update the DNS records. At that point, the DHCP server is going to own all those records. So you've got to be careful with that. You want them to delete the records at the same time. That's a good thing. What about this option? Dynamically update DDNS records for clients and do not request updates. Old clients who just don't understand it, they fall into this category. You don't understand DNS any way, shape, or form. We're not going to ask the DHCP server to do it on our behalf. We just don't know it's even possible to do. You might get iPhones, old Android boxes might not support that. Or we could just disable it altogether. I'm not really going to play around with any of these settings for right now, but let's go into this one. DHCP name protection is disabled. What if one computer has a name and then you boot up another computer with the same name on the network? What is it going to do to the first computer?
So delete it, boot it?
No, the first computer won't be, if it's booted up later, it won't be able to come up online. So what you can do is enable name protection.
What did you find?
Just under here at this configure. So basically, if one computer already has a computer name and another computer boots up with the same name, DHCP won't give them an IP address. So that prevents that second computer from coming online and stealing the first computer's name.
I mean, it will give you a warning, professor?
No, you won't. You just won't get an IP address. Okay, just name protection. It's kind of a cool feature.
You want us to enable that?
Yep, enable it, hit OK, and apply.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, like I said, there's a lot of little topics in this chapter. The other thing,
Chapter 8,
11.
11.
So let's talk about a superscope. Right now, how many available IPs can we use for this subnet? Well, no, how many IPs can we pass out for this Class C subnet? 254 addresses. And we have a router right here. So what happens when we bring in another 100 people? So we have a total of, let's just say, 325 people, 325 devices. What do we need to do? Well, we could re-subnet. That means moving the IP addresses of all the servers, all the file servers, everything, which will be quite a bit. So let's say this IP is 192.168.0.1. How many IP addresses can I give to a interface? An unlimited number, right?
Yeah.
I could give that router 2 IPs. One in one subnet, one in another subnet. And then I could pass out 192.168.0.1 to 192.168.1.254. That's a total of 200. That's a total of almost a little over 500 IP addresses that I have available. By allowing you to pass out 2 subnet addresses on the same LAN segment. So when they get an IP from this subnet, they're going to use this gateway. When they get an IP from the first subnet, they'll use this gateway, even though it's on the same interface. The trick to get this working is not only do you pass out 2 subnet addresses, you also make sure that your router's in both subnets. Same physical LAN segment, the router's in both subnets.
What's that called?
Super scope. So first I'm going to go to my router. I'm going to go to my NAT router. And give it an IP from the other subnet on the private side. So it's part of both subnets.
What do you mean?
Go to your IPv4 settings on your private interface on your NAT router. Go to properties. Go to advanced. Then under IP settings, under the first box at the top, click add and type in another IP address. Under IP settings, there's add, edit, advanced. So you can just give your computer as many IP addresses as you want. And when you do an IP config all, they should all be listed there.
What IP did you give it?
1.1. Okay.
What's the subnet? 24?
Default. Yep.
We don't have to add a default gateway because this is the default gateway.
Right. So I'm going to go back to my DHCP one. Guys, I'm going to show you how to do the super scope and the 2 individual scopes all in one method. So we're going to create a new scope. And we're just going to call for like private network.
So we're back on DHCP 1.
Right. And we're creating a new scope.
So that's before ACO.
And what do you have?
And then I put in the first IP from the first subnet and the last IP from the last subnet.
So 0.1.
And I leave my subnet mask at /24. The computer's going to be smart enough to realize that that's two different subnets.
So,
0.1 and 1.1.
zero.
I'm just, I just throw it out.
I don't know. It could be 15.6, but.
I'm sorry?
So there's conflict with mass conflicts in the existing scope.
I understand what you're saying. Guys, I'm just going to cancel this other scope. Just delete it.
Where does it go?
The scope we made the policy on.
So should we cancel this and then?
No, stay okay and cancel the other one.
You just cancel what we were doing and just delete the other scope. So I'm going to call this private again. Put in the first subnet, first IP of the first subnet and the last IP of the second subnet. Okay, I'm gonna click next. And it's saying that it's too large to fit in one subnet. Would you like to create two scopes? Click next.
Quick yes or no?
Yes. Guys, in previous editions of Server, it would come up with some weird number of scopes. You're going to be creating 16 million scopes. It was always wrong. They got that right, and now this is wrong. Each scope will not have 256 addresses. How many will each scope have? 254.
Does some programmer not know how to set that?
I don't know what it is. 8 hours.
You can't have
Okay. Now, guys, doing this method, we need to deal with multiple router IP addresses. So we need to add both routers. Because remember,
Zero dot one and 1.1?
right. The domain name, everything is fine there. And activate the scope.
You kept everything else.
I'm going to rename this private.
So I said, did you keep everything else the same?
Oh, it won't allow me to rename. Let me see if I can go inside. Yeah. No, I left it there. Guys, here's what we did was, if I go to scope options now, I need to edit the router. So for this one, what router should I pass out?
How do you think?
I mean, zero.
Right, so I want to remove this. Go to expand your scope, go to scope options, double click router. And on this one, what do I need? 1.1. So I'm going to remove this one.
Wait,
So for the 1.0 network, the router should be 1.1. For the 0.0 network, the router should be 0.1.
It wouldn't work if you left it there.
No, because it would have worked if we flipped the order around on the second one. Which one was passed out first?
So for both scopes, just fix the router.
But you will have two quad zero routes on each of those computers. Could potentially mess things up. I'm sorry?
So for both scopes, just make it the correct router.
Correct. Okay, two more topics. Okay, guys, apparently we can't split a super scope. Let's create a different scope just for this next lesson. It won't allow me to do it.
We delete this one?
No, I'm just going to leave it alone, but I'm going to create the super scope to be, I'm going to call it private 2 and just give it a different subnet address.
Alright, what is this next part we're working on?
This is called splitting a scope.
When we delete the first, we just need.
I'm just going to choose a different scope, different subnet. 192.168.2.1 to 2.54.
So, IPv4 new scope. And then, what do you call this one again? Private. Host. Where in unit?
Private 2. And go 2.1 to 2.254.
Two not one, 264.
Right.
254.
Click next. I don't care if we put an exclusion or any other data.
So just don't put one?
Yeah, I'm just going through next. I just want a scope that's not part of a super scope. And so guys, with the super scope, this was grayed out. If we only have one authorized DHCP server, this will be grayed out as well. So highlight your scope, go to advanced, and say split scope.
I don't see.
Did we set a gateway?
No,
How about your shield?
just go through all the way through.
Oh, I see it.
Which directory are you in?
I'll highlight my scope, go to advanced, and say split scope. Guys, up into 2012, there was no way to replicate data between DHCP servers. Now, we do have the ability to replicate data. Because if you had two computers with the same scope, they'd conflict and they could pass out the same address. What you had in the past was you had to do something called a 75-25 split. You would have to give one DHCP server 75% of its own address and 20% of another subnet address. And then the other DHCP, you would have to do the reverse. So they kind of use that concept right here, even though they had the ability to replicate data. But you had to do that manually in the past. You had to go to one DHCP server, give it 75% of its own subnet and 20% of another subnet. Go to the DHCP server in the other subnet and do the reverse. Well, this wizard will actually allow us to do that split automatically. So what's the other server's name? cs01vm12.ferris.com and say click add server. Click next.
I got the add server and then.
Then did you type in? You can just type the name in, then just click next.
Oh,
Or you can click add server and just choose it from the list. Look what it does.
Which one do you want us to choose? Does it matter?
Yes, I do. I want you to choose 12
Just close that.
because the other two aren't even booted. They're part of the failover cluster. This won't work in the failover cluster section.
Wait, we're adding VM 2 or 12?
We're adding VM 12.
Okay.
Guys, what we're doing is we're telling what percentage of the scope to give the other server. So we're going to give the other server 204 to 254. And this server will keep 1 to 203. And if you had another subnet, you might do the reverse. Have it pass 80% out, and this one keep 20. And you just change these numbers and it'll flip it for you automatically. I'm going to click next. There's no delay in either server. Next, then finish. Close it. I'm going to go to the other server and sign in. But it's not coming up. I manually had to activate it. Did it come up automatically activated for anyone?
No.
Guys, look what they're doing to, look how they're doing it. All they are doing, it's just a trick, it's just doing different exclusions on each server. Because you need to right click it and activate the scope. It didn't activate it automatically. So that's all it's really doing is just doing an exclusion range. But it's also figuring out your number. Right now, it would be relatively easy to figure out for a Class C address what's the 80-20 split. What if it was a Class B address and you had 65,000 addresses to work with? You know, it makes it a lot easier to do the 80-20 split. And it configured all the scope options, everything that would have been, it just carries it across. If you excluded the first 10 addresses, it would have copied that exclusion as well. So if there was an exclusion already there in the first scope, it would copy that exclusion, then add an additional exclusion for the addresses. So this exclusion right here is what? That's the IPs used on the first server. Let's go to look at the first server. What is this exclusion? That's the IPs used on the second server. In the past, you had to do this on your own. Now they have this utility that will right-click and allow you to just do it automatically. Same concept, probably not the best way to do it. We now can put failover clusters. We could DHCP failover clusters, or you can just turn on failover here. Guys, I don't know if this will allow us to do failover and split scopes, but we'll see. Configure failover. Highlight the scope, configure failover.
We're back on one.
Back on one.
Highlight. Second scope.
Yep.
Configure failover.
Guys, I'm doing failover on the scope. I could have went to my server under IPv4 and configured failover there and choose all my subnets. Actually, let's do that. That might be more interesting. Highlight IPv4 and do configure failover for all the scopes under IPv4. Click next. Where do we want to put it? 12. Why can't we do it that, I thought it might give us an error, because look what it's going to give us a problem with. Because we split that scope. There's already one there, but that's okay, I'm gonna leave that alone and go next. It's only gonna work for 0 and 1. No, it won't allow us to go. Guys, we can't do failover 2. I'm just gonna failover my super scope.
You still putting it on 12?
Yep, put it on 12.
That you can do.
You have to put in some sort of shared secret. It's going to have some load balancing. So each server will try to handle the, because remember, they're both going to be listening on port 67. So they're going to talk amongst each other to determine which one will handle that request. There's my super scope. This is probably a better way to do it than the split scope method. If one server goes down, because they both control 100% of the scope,
Oh, there it is.
not 80 or 20% of the scope. For this to work, there's replication in the background. These two servers are talking to each other constantly. Before 2012, we didn't have that feature. There was no talking to one another. You did the split scope, was your only method. For 2012, we can either put it in a failover cluster or just turn on failover right within the DHCP server.
This would take a really long time if it was a really big scope.
No. It's just copying over the data file. But also, guys, that's an interesting thing. It will also, if I had any leases and I turned this on, it would copy over the existing lease data. One server is aware of the lease of another server. With the 80-20 split like we just did, we don't have that collusion. There's no sort of, what addresses have you passed out? With the failover option, we do have that ability. Which is a better option? This or inside the failover cluster like we did last week?
So this seems a lot better.
Why is this better than the other method?
Easier.
Because both these servers are up and running at the same time, doing load balancing. In a failover cluster scenario, one server is operating, looking at that shared data on that iSCSI disk, and when that fails, then the other one picks up the slack and reads that disk. Only one server in a failover cluster works at a time. In this scenario, both these servers are running at the same time, where they're each handling load balance. So if you have a very busy network, with a lot of DHCP requests, this would probably be a better method. Okay.